So, if you saw my last video regarding leadership, you know that I am going through and rereading John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And so today I want to talk about the second law that he came up with, and that is the law of influence. And so I just want to read a quote from the book real quick. It says, "True leadership cannot be awarded, appointed, or assigned. It comes only from influence, and that cannot be mandated. It must be earned. The only thing a title can buy is a little time, either to increase your level of influence with others or to undermine it." And so I also want to share a couple of stories from my own personal experience so you can get a better understanding of what leadership isn't. And he does a very good job in this chapter talking about how leadership is only good if you do it through influence versus a lot of other mechanisms. And so he talks about title, he talks about other items. And so, one thing that I've seen in my career is people who are seen as leaders, but they're not leading through influence, they're leading through fear or through intimidation or manipulation. And oftentimes, especially in the corporate world, that can come across as leadership, even though it's not. If you put that into a vacuum, anyone would agree that it's not leadership. But sometimes, for whatever reason, you put that into a corporate setting and people find that that is leadership when it's not. And so, like, one example I can give you is I was the CEO of a nonprofit organization. So if you're a CEO, you report to a board. And so I reported to a board. And so the president of my board was a very unpleasant individual. By all accounts, everyone agreed she was not pleasant to work with and to deal with. And she had a certain reputation at her company as well. But it was fascinating the things that she would criticize me for that were often untrue, unfounded, not accurate, you name it. But the rest of the board refused to stand up or stand against her because of how manipulative she was, how threatening she would come across sometimes. And so the other people on the board, rather than standing up to her and forcing her to act in a way that had more integrity and wasn't so critical of things that shouldn't be critical of, they just absolutely bent over and took it. And they didn't stand up for me. They didn't stand up for the organization. They didn't stand up for themselves. I sat in numerous board meetings and other meetings where I just watched this person steamroll anyone and everyone who got in her path. She didn't care. And it was the rare person who would stand up to her. And when the few times I saw someone stand up to her, she would just blow them out of the water any chance that she got. And that is not leadership. That is fear. That's manipulation. That's the opposite, the antithesis of what leadership should be, right? So that's one example that I have. And the other thing I was thinking about, I wrote some notes down here in my notebook. So the other thing about that too is many supervisors, bosses, managers, people like that believe they have influence over their direct reports or whatever. But the truth is, a lot of them only have leverage. And what do I mean by that? I mean, they don't have influence. They don't have leadership capabilities. All they have is leverage because they know that, their direct reports are going to do what they say, not because they have influence and not because they're good leaders, but because they want a paycheck. They want to continue to get a paycheck. And they don't want to have to worry about not having a job anymore. And so you want to make sure you don't confuse leverage with influence or leverage with leadership, because those aren't the same thing. And a lot of people think, again, that they are leading their team and their direct reports. But the truth is that people are just, following them because they want to continue to get paid and they want to continue to get a job. They're not doing it because they really believe in your leadership or believe in the vision that you're casting. And so, you got to be very careful to make sure that you actually are leading through influence. And so one other example that I could share with you recently, I was working for a CPA firm, and there was an individual at the firm who was the firm administrator, but he held lots of different hats. But the problem is he wasn't a leader. He just happened to be in a position within the firm that he controlled a lot of people's fates, basically. And so if you ever upset him or offended him or otherwise got on his bad side, there was no going back. Like, there was never an opportunity to apologize. There was never an opportunity to work things out. And because there was certain relationships in the firm, there was nowhere to turn to if you got on his bad side. There was nowhere to be able to get the situation rectified in your favor. In fact, the opposite would typically happen. If you tried to talk to someone else at the firm about the situation that you were in with this individual, nothing would happen, and oftentimes the target would be put in your back. And I saw lots of people who ran afoul of this person end up losing their job, or they end up having to leave the firm because the environment ends up being so toxic in a situation like that. Because again, this individual didn't have any sort of leadership abilities, zero leadership abilities. He led through fear and manipulation and verbal abuse. Like, I saw him verbally abuse so many young staff at this firm. It was horrific. I couldn't believe it that this was allowed to happen. And to see the leadership at the firm just turn a blind eye. And this person, didn't generate revenue, didn't drive revenue for the firm, didn't do any of that. But because of a relationship he had with someone else at the firm, he was allowed to continue to do that and abuse people and manipulate people and, really exhibit the antithesis of what a leader should be. And so again, it's very important that if you're looking to be a leader, you lead through your influence on your team. You don't lead because of your title. You don't lead because you make a certain amount of money. You lead because you generally are influencing others. On a positive note, when I was working for another CPA firm, a much, much, much larger CPA firm, I had a wonderful boss, and she never, ever, ever needed to use leverage. She never needed to use her title to get our team motivated to follow her lead or to complete tasks she's given us or to otherwise do our jobs. We all genuinely believed in the vision that she had for our practice and genuinely believed that she was trying to lead us to greatness, so to speak, as great as you can be in a CPA firm. And it's that type of leader that I've always loved to work for, because that's the type of leader that I would go into battle for with no questions asked. Not because I was getting a paycheck, not because they were a partner or an executive director of the firm or the CEO of a company. None of that mattered. I would go into battle with that person and with that boss simply because I trusted her, that she was leading us in the right direction, and that she was never going to resort to any of these other non-leadership styles to get us to execute on our client projects or on other things we were working on. And so it's just very important if you find yourself in a situation where you are under a boss that is leading you through manipulation, through leverage, through abuse, verbal abuse, maybe even physical abuse, because that happens sometimes. I would encourage you, don't report it. Don't report it to HR as much as you probably want to, especially if you're the kind of person who wants to do things the right way. Because again, it's important to understand that HR, they are there to protect the company from the employees, not the other way around. They're not there to protect the employees from the company. They are there to protect the company from the employees. And so you kick up too much dust about these issues internally, you're going to get a target on your back, and you'll find yourself either forced out involuntarily, or they will basically make it a constructive firing because they'll make your life so miserable and put so many obstacles in your way that you will have no other choice but to quit or to find a new job. So rather than to have that happen, you know what? Keep working there, do the best job you can, but make sure you're looking for a new job. I certainly welcome any of your comments, questions, feedback on any of what I said. And certainly if you have any stories you want to share about either leaders you've enjoyed working with or leaders you haven't enjoyed working with, put them in the comments. Send me a message. Love to hear from you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.